let's face it, documentary to some extent is a Rorschach. We open up lots of many cans of worms along the way, and people bring their own experience and wisdom and baggage to the table and start to focus on different things. Sometimes they relate to certain things, sometimes they're repulsed by certain things, sometimes they are sometimes they are going to reject certain things, and I think that's fair. But I also think if we're going to talk about how the evangelical community, to the tune of about 80% of their voters, helped uplift Donald Trump into the presidency, we have to follow it to its obvious conclusion, which was the end of his presidency, which ended with an extraordinarily disturbing and historic, violent act in which the flag of treasonous traitors who tried to overthrow this country, the Confederate flag, flew for the first time in our nation's capital, in the People's House, in a terribly violent act in which the majority of people we interviewed in the documentary are Christians, one of whom is, I mentioned, an evangelical pastor, which they found very un-Christian-like, but yet there, all over that crowd, was Christian iconography, were crosses, were statues, was the Virgin Mary, were images of Jesus himself in MAGA regalia, and religious leaders leading prayers, the QAnon shaman breaking into the house and on the dais, leading his compatriots in a prayer so that God would help assist in a violent insurrection and overturning of a free and fair election in this country. So I say, how is that not related to the story we're telling? And very much like I talk about the origins of evangelical political activism through this very cynical, Jerry Falwell Sr. did not preach his first sermon against abortion for 5 or 6 years after Roe v. Wade, until after he saw that this is where the power and the money would be. And to his credit, he was right. And his son carried on that tradition in a 40-plus year multi-generational evangelical dynasty that not only had outsized influence on presidential politics, but did ultimately succeed in what they claimed their mission was, which was to overturn Roe v. Wade. And I happened to be in Washington, D.C., interviewing Megan K. Stack, who profiled the Falwells after the scandal, who spent a lot of time with them, talked to us in detail about their relationship and their marriage as it exists today in the documentary. That day, while we were sitting there in the middle of that documentary, the Dobbs decision was officially released. And I walked about 15, 20 minutes from that interview to the court and took some of those photographs that you see at the end of the documentary there. And I will say, in a peculiar postscript that is not in the documentary, so you get some up-to-date info, because we didn't know where it would stand. We didn't know where it would stand as of publication time, so we didn't include this title card. But as we sit here today talking, gentlemen, Jerry Falwell Jr., his family, and Giancarlo Granda are still partners in that real estate venture. So the pie chart that you see in the documentary, animated, breaking down the ownership, they are all still in bed together, if you will. Becky Falwell owns 50.1%. Jerry Falwell III owns 25%, and Giancarlo Granda owns 24.9% of that property right now. Bizarre, but true.